It's only when you look back that you realise how something changed. It's never in a big way or in an obvious way. There's no single moment where you can point to it and say, that's where everything shifted. It happens gradually through decisions that make sense at the time. When I met my husband, I was working in corporate finance in the Netherlands. It was the kind of role where everything runs on deadlines that do not move. Month end, quarter end, year end, the pace is set and you're expected to keep up with it. At the same time, I was managing Crohn's disease. And even when I reduced my hours, the pressure didn't really change. It was always there in the background. So I already knew I needed something different, even if I didn't fully know what that looked like yet. Around that time, we bought a house together. It needed a lot of work, although it came with a business space on the ground floor. I'd already started retraining, moving away from finance, and that space felt like an opportunity to build something of my own. So I started my skincare business. At the beginning, it felt like a real shift, like I was moving towards something that suited me better. There was a sense that it could eventually support me financially in the same way my job had. The reality, however, was very different. I went from a steady income to bringing in very little. Not nothing, however, nowhere near enough to live on. And without it being a big conversation, my husband took on the financial side of things. Bills, living costs, everything. At the time, it just felt practical. He was working full time, I was building something new. It made sense. Then he was made redundant. And long story short, we ended up moving to Switzerland for his next role. That move changed a lot. I left behind the network I'd been building. I was in a place where English wasn't widely spoken, which made everyday things feel more complicated. My business became harder to run with new challenges around sourcing ingredients. And at the same time, my health declined again. Slowly over time, I became more dependent on my husband financially. There wasn't a clear point where that happened. It built gradually through everything that was going on. And it didn't just stay about money. It started to affect how I saw myself as well. My confidence shifted, not all at once, just enough that I noticed it. My sense of freedom changed, especially around money. And within the relationship, there were things I didn't say. Not because I couldn't say them, rather because something in me held back. It just felt easier to keep things smooth, not to question too much, not to create tension. And again, that wasn't a decision I sat down and made. It just became the easier way to be. Over time, that creates a certain kind of dynamic. One person in the relationship starts to hold a lot, financially, practically, emotionally. From the outside, everything can look fine. Life's still functioning. Nothing's breaking down. Internally, however, something feels different. A slight weight. A sense that things aren't as balanced as they once were. The thing is, this isn't limited to situations like mine. You might recognize it in different ways, where one person becomes the place you go to for everything, where you process most of your life through one relationship. where your sense of support narrows without you really noticing it happening. It doesn't usually feel wrong at first. That's part of why it's hard to see. It can feel close, supportive, even necessary. There's often a point, though, where you become aware of it, not because something has gone wrong, rather because you notice the shift in yourself, what you say, what you don't say, what you rely on, what you don't question. And that awareness doesn't automatically change anything. It just sits there alongside everything else. Sometimes having a space outside of that dynamic matters more than you realize. Somewhere you can see what's happening without it being filtered through the relationship itself. That's where something like my one-to-one support can come in, just as a place to look at things more clearly. There's also the part of how you relate to yourself within it, what you take on, what you assume is yours to carry. That's where something like taking 100% responsibility for everything in your life starts to come into focus, just in understanding what's actually yours within all this. Because by the time you see it clearly, it's already been there for a while. If you look at your own life, there may be a place where something like this has formed. Not in the same way, just in that quiet shift where one part has started to carry more than it used to, and something else has stepped back. Sometimes the first thing that changes isn't the situation. It's simply seeing it as it is.